Currently, there is a lot of controversy and drama around this post that came out late yesterday, and it's gotten so controversial, in fact, that it has spread to Anime News Network. There is an article kind of covering this, and if you go into the comment section of this article, you see mostly people going back and forth, but there is definitely an overwhelming amount of people that seem to be very pro-censorship for what happened to this show. Now, I want to get into that topic of pro-censorship, anti-censorship, and all that in a second, but there is a few things I do need to talk about when it comes to this before I really dive in to what actually happened here. First off, I'm not going to pretend, I'm not going to lie to you, I want to be completely transparent. I have never watched Macross Dynamite 7. However, this is going to be some interesting lore. I have seen this movie of Macross a long time ago. I'm talking about back in like 2008, 2009. I watched this movie for the first time on like some form of pirate site years ago. It's been way over like 15 years basically since I've seen it, and there is a lot of sporadic memories I have about it, but I'm not going to come into this video and act like I am a massive mega fan of Macross, that I know every little intricate detail of Macross. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to act like I know every little nuance of the characters, the history and lore of Macross. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to lie about it, but I am just looking at this as someone from the outside and trying to kind of piece together what the community is kind of saying about this currently. So let's get right into that. So Macross Dynamite 7, I did a little bit of research into this, and it's a very, very old anime. You take one good look on my anime list, you see that this came out back in December 18th of 1997, and it finished airing in 1998. There was only 4 episodes. It was an OVA series, and for those that don't know what an OVA is, because nowadays we don't get a lot of OVAs actually, which is very strange, but OVAs was basically like some special episodes that would broadcast or come out on BD, DVD releases, or VHS release, and it was more or less allowed to be as uncensored as possible. Think of like Kiss Sis, if you have ever heard of Kiss Sis. I know that's a controversial title, but there is the actual TV series, and then there's a bunch of episodes that are OVAs that are allowed to basically show anything they want from the manga without really any censorship whatsoever. So basically OVAs were always used, at least traditionally a long time ago, as a way to release an episode in its purest form without really censoring any content. However, from my research, Macross Dynamite 7 is anime original. I mean, it even says here it's original, so this wasn't based on a manga or a light novel or anything like that. So these were just created as original stories, etc. And like I said, I have not read Macross Dynamite 7, but from what I can piece together, people said it was like a Moby Dick type story, like, for instance, like Wells or whatever. That's at least what I gather, but that's all I really fully know about it, besides obviously the controversy I'm going to be talking about. But basically, it's a very old OVA series that came out in the 90s, and a lot of people within the Macross community apparently even agreed that this series was legitimately very niche even within their very niche community. It was not something that was relatively talked about a lot, and when it was talked about, it was very scarce. It was not a big popular series. At least that's what I can gather. It was something that just kind of flew under the radar for a very long time. There was people, obviously, that did watch it, but there wasn't a lot of discussion besides, let's say, some of the most popular stuff from Macross. So anyways, we fast forward to the current age. We fast forward to, 2025, 2024, etc. like that, and we have, Macross, kind of being rejuvenated, and it's been being aired in Japan as of late, and because of that, Disney has been trying to air it, Hulu's been airing it, it even says here on the post, and upon the airing of this old series from the 90s, some content was censored/cut. Now, the content in question was apparently a scene that depicted a character that was getting, as you can see here, I can't really say the words because YouTube would not allow me. Ironic, since I'm talking about censorship, by the way. Very ironic. But that's the platform we're on. We allowed YouTube to get to such a point we can't talk about certain things, or the big old demonetization symbol will appear. But, basically, you read this here, this is what happened to the character, and basically, because of what was about to happen to her, essay was literally about to happen to her, this entire scene was cut. Now, here's the thing, we are currently in a landscape in the anime community, and I've definitely noticed it, and I think a lot of people have noticed it, to where anything of, let's say, fan service, or sexual content, any sexual content, good or bad, is scrutinized to a heavy degree. And obviously, this scene is definitely uncomfortable for people. I can see why people would say it's uncomfortable people. Gonna be blunt here, but basically we live in an age right now, if there's any content that has any form of sexuality in it, it basically is taboo. It's evil, so to speak. There's a lot of people that believe that. I mean, you look at stuff and just how people react to maybe scenes in Chainsaw Man or Dawn to Dawn, for example. I mean, hell, that got me literally doxxed just talking about a panel, nothing else. All I'm saying is, it's very clear that, you know, there is a lot of people that just hate content that's any form of sexuality, if it's good or bad, okay? And obviously this is on the bad variety. For instance, you know, a character literally getting essayed, okay? But the thing about it is, what I can gather about the scene, and from reading the article as well, from Anime News Network, is that the scene in particular was never presented in a positive way. It was never presented in a way to where the villain character that was initiating an act against this girl was ever deemed as a good person. They were never looked at as a hero or a person that was respectable in any way. They were just a vile entity. And apparently it was like a lesbian scene, apparently. That's at least what I can gather. Once again, I have not watched it myself, so I cannot confirm that. But regardless of the situation, the scene was never depicted in a positive light, and so this is where it comes into my discussion of pro-censorship and anti-censorship, where, you know, that discussion lies. So let's dive headfirst into that one. So basically, what the comments I've seen about this topic from, like, major Macross fans, or people just in general talking about it, you know, people seem to be more or less saying that the scene in question in the Macross OVA episode was unnecessary. That's what they have deemed and said it. Apparently, it didn't really enhance or do anything to the plot. Once again, I am not watching. Maybe I really should sit down and watch it myself to really just see exactly what everybody's talking about. But basically, the scene that was cut didn't really offer anything to the story or do anything whatsoever. Once again, can't confirm that. But I will say that there is a lot of people that say that, you know, they're happy to see it removed. However, here's my stance on censorship, and I made this very clear in just the last few days alone. I hate censorship, okay? And I understand the content in question that obviously is being cut here is definitely uncomfortable for people. But I've said this before, and I will say it again. Just because content makes you extremely uncomfortable, and it is uncomfortable content, does not mean that it should not have a place in writing or literature. It can be showcased with nuance. And in this case, the character in general was never showcased to be, quote-unquote, a hero or a good person. They were obviously deemed as a vicious, vile entity, and was stopped before the act fully took place. So, because of that situation, I'm just like, it's not like the writer of the OVAs that was doing the scene was explicitly saying that this is okay. They didn't. It's kind of like it gets into the whole Goblin Slayer situation that happened years ago. Some of you might remember, but when Goblin Slayer episode 1 came out, there was a lot of controversy in the anime community about that episode. I remember seeing so many articles, so many YouTube videos discussing the topic, but basically, Goblin Slayer was getting hella canceled when cancel culture was really at its peak because of the first episode where a bunch of female characters, they got SA'd by a bunch of goblins, and Goblin Slayer MC came in, killed all the goblins, obviously. And the episode never depicted the goblins as quote-unquote good people, good actions, nothing like that. It was just explaining what the element that the goblins do, how they procreate, stuff like that, and that was all it was. And obviously, Goblin Slayer did not like that, and he eradicates them. He gets rid of them. So, the first episode of Goblin Slayer never tried to showcase anything in a positive light whatsoever. Never tried to spin it like that, nothing like that. So basically, at the end of the day, you know, people got upset for something very similar to this. For instance, a scene that is being showcased of a bad villain or a bad person doing a bad deed. And that's kind of gets into the big discussion that is with our current entertainment, is that we're now in a society where we can't have villains being villains. And I think one of the big reasons why this has happened as of late in the last few years is because a lot of writers now, when it comes to writing villains, they have to make them very sympathetic, or you have to relate with them to some degree. A good example of this is like Thanos. Like, he's not a perfect example, but Thanos, obviously, in the Endgame and Infinity War movies, mainly Infinity War, he was meant to be a character that you could kind of understand his motive, even if you didn't fully agree with him, and, you know, you didn't like what he was doing to the characters and stuff. you can understand some of the reasons why he did the things he did. And I feel like the cultural shift of villains has been definitely pushed that direction, where every villain needs to be understandable or sympathetic. You gotta understand why they do that. They have to have a crybaby backstory, something like that. They can't necessarily be a villain. And this gets into, like, Dio. I think Dio is a good counterexample of this. Dio is a villain within JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. That's just a villain. He's an asshole. Like, he literally, like, kicks a dog. You know, what he does to Jonathan in part 1 is absolutely horrific. And it's like, he's a villain. And he was never meant to be a good person. He didn't try to act like he was just a bad dude. And the same can be said for Frieza within Dragon Ball. You know, there's gonna be villains that are just villains to be villains. They don't need to have a, like I said, crybaby backstory. But obviously, the entertainment industry has pushed that narrative of villains have to be relatable to a degree. And I think that's what's probably caused a lot of this content, where villains can't be villains anymore. Because obviously, even if they're villains, they can't be too villainous, or, you know, it might seem like they're condoning it. That's what I feel like a lot of writers do now. So, when we get back into this discussion of Macross Dynamite 7, I feel like the people that are happy about the censorship are not understanding the nuances of it. Even if the scene theoretically isn't offering anything to the writing or the story in general, once again, can't confirm that, I haven't watched it myself, but I will say that it was obviously there, it was written there, it was an anime original. I mean, literally, it confirms it here. It was an original series, not even based on a manga or light novel. It was there. And regardless if you agree or disagree with the vision of the original, that's how it was written. That's just, in general, how it was written. And so I think that, retroactively ruining and censoring work decades later is not the way, especially when the scene, once again, never was showcased to be positive. All I'm saying. So, getting back into the main topic of situation, I am absolutely appalled by the amount of, like, pro-censorship I have seen around this discussion and the pushback of just censoring things. Now, once again, the discussion might have a little bit more of a difference if the scene was trying to make it positive, but even then, it didn't. So, all I'm saying is that, this drama, crazy, man. It's crazy. This is the current state of not just, like, the anime and manga community, but just entertainment in general. I've definitely seen this. It's like a character can be a mass murderer and just start ridding people, like, destroying planets and stuff. That's A-okay. But as soon as there is a little bit questionable, like, sexual content that obviously makes you very uncomfortable, and obviously it is uncomfortable, that needs to be censored and removed completely. It's just, there's such double standards, and I hate that. I really do. Because it's like, you don't see this stuff happen for Game of Thrones. You don't. But, yeah, that's all I really want to talk about. Just want to talk about the subject. I thought it was incredibly important to kind of get out there for people to know. Maybe I should sit down and watch this, dedicate some time sometime this week to watch this, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. Be safe, stay healthy, and I love you guys. Chibi out.